Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar about accelerating food industry growth. We're going to be talking about open innovation in two ends of the value chain for consumer products, the manufacturer, represented by Mondelēz International, and the retailer, represented by Sainsburys. A little bit about Eatable Adventures. At Eatable Adventures, we believe startups are leading the revolution, creating solutions that transform how food is produced, transformed, and consumed. We basically connect the most disruptive food startups with corporations and investors, developing the right collaborations with a single mission that is building tomorrow's food companies. And today, the speakers will be Milena Lazaresca, Head of Future Brands at Sainsburys, and Gil Horsky, Director of Innovation Snack Futures at Mondelez International. And please allow me to give a little brief about Milena initially. Milena is the Head of Future Brands at Sainsburys and is responsible for the team supercharging the discovery and growth of existing, new, and distinctive brands. As a founding member of the team in early 2018, Milena has led the creation of a portfolio of over 150 innovative and distinctive brands, which gives Sainsbury's customers even more reasons to shop there. Milena has been with Sainsbury's since 2014 and has held senior roles across strategy and trading, including managing a £1.1 billion category P&L and buying function. Prior to Sainsbury's, Milena spent 6 years as a management consultant with Bain & Company in London, Johannesburg, and Sao Paulo. She holds a BA in molecular biology and an HPhil in bioscience enterprise from Cambridge University, both of them. Milena, thanks for joining us. Let me introduce Gil. Gil Horsky's passion is creating innovative products and snacks that are good for the people, kind to the planet, and deliciously fun. He is part of the founding team for Snack Futures, the new innovation and venture hub for Mondelēz International, with two pillars, invent and venture. Snack Futures is on a mission to create a vibrant ecosystem of partners to invent and to make venture investments in the next generation of snacks and entrepreneurs. Through his career, Horsky has the privilege to work on some of the most iconic global brands, Milka, Pepsi, Quaker Oats, Toblerone, Cadbury's, Oreo, Tropicana, and Nestlé. Gil, thanks a lot for joining us as well today. We want to give a little bit of context about why we are putting together both of you to discuss what is happening in the market. Basically, food system is changing rapidly and consumers' demand is changing even faster than the market. Food startups are bringing innovative solutions to the challenges the food industry is facing. And open innovation is bringing corporations big opportunities to adapt their products and services and boost growth in their respective organizations. We want to get out of this session with a few takeaways. What are the implications that an open innovation mindset creates for a corporation, and what are the benefits that the corporation can obtain? From a corporate angle, what are the nuances of collaborating with the startups, how difficult it is? What are the main tools to collaborate with the startups, and what are the outcomes of this collaboration? And how working with the startups can help corporates come out stronger from this crisis situation. We have a few questions and we will address those questions to both of you. So, Gil, how will you describe working with the startups at Mondelez International?
So, I think, first of all, working with startups is a very important thing for us in Mondelez, and it's been growing in the priority in the last few years. And I think the good news that there is different ways to work with Mondelez. If you're a startup, I think that there's the Snack Futures way, which is part of the team that I work in, that I think as was mentioned before, we have two pillars, an invent pillar, which we basically serve as intrapreneurs. We go and we identify a space. It's usually in the well-being snacking territory. We have a game board of spaces that we're very interested in to enter. And we go ahead and start our own business. We start our own brand. We do that with external partners. It could be external co-packers, external culinary partners, and even startups that sometimes help us with bringing a specific expertise into that. And we would launch that brand quite quickly, test it in the market, and see if it does well, we'll scale it up. And if it doesn't, we'll just wind it down and move to the other one, to the next one. So that's one way. The second way is our CVC, our corporate venture arm group. We do make investments in snacking brands. We've made several in the US, you know, there are discussions about expanding that scope beyond the US and even beyond just brands, and actually even more enabling technologies. And then the third pillar, which is actually the one that, you know, that I think historically existed the most, and I think we actually accelerated in the last few years, is around our R&D open innovation platform. And we basically have, we have an online platform. Any of you can go on, you'll see it, that we actually put out what we're looking for, what kind of partners our R&D team members are looking for. It could be sugar reduction, it could be helping us in our cocoa supply chain, it could be in around data and simulation for our R&D team members. And we look for partners that way. And startups can apply to work with us, and those that work with us would work with us probably on a POC, on a specific project, or that can lead to a JDA, to a joint development agreement, and one day can even lead to being a partner of Mondelez or a supplier for Mondelez. So these different ways are the different ways that startups can tap into. And I'll say that the last one that we have been using in the last year more and more, and we had a lot of success, is when we define a specific challenge or problem that is very specific, that we're looking for partners for help, and we share it in a specific ecosystem. We tell the ecosystem we are looking for partners to help us on a specific topic within cocoa. And we had a lot of success with that, because I think one of my big beliefs is when you're a corporate, the more you define what your problems are, the easier you make it for the partners and the startups, the relevant ones, to come to you, and you make the conversation much more productive for both sides. So these are the different ways to partner with Mondelez.
Good. Milena, what about future brands for Sainsbury's?
Yeah, so I'll start also with a bit of an overview of how startups work with Sainsbury's. And for those of you that might not know, Sainsbury's is the second largest retailer in the UK. We're only present in the UK. And of course, as a retailer, most of our business is listing products and selling those products to our customers and running the shops. So we collaborate with startups around the business. Future brands specifically, which is what I focus on, is all about helping Sainsbury's differentiate our ranges and therefore give our customers even more reasons to choose to shop with us, because they can find products and brands that they love and they can't find anywhere else. So their shop is that much more interesting, and they can find brands that they really enjoy. So my team finds and then supports the growth of innovative brands and very distinctive brands that we partner with on an exclusive basis for a short period of time. And we support these brands. Some of them are very, very young, and they haven't been in a single retailer before they come to Sainsbury's. And we're the first retailer that gives them distribution and helps them get in front of customers and gain some traction.
Good. I do agree that getting a challenge as close as possible is always the best way to attract the right startups. And in many occasions, it's very, very difficult to select from the amount of companies that are possibly approaching you. So it's always complex to identify what is the best approach to getting a corporation, and what is the best way to approach a startup. Let's move to the next question. Could you give us an example of a positive outcome of these collaborations, Milena?
Yeah, so we've built a portfolio of about 150 brands over the last year, and all of these brands are exclusive to Sainsbury's, and they're across all of our ranges. So we cover food and non-food grocery items, but the majority tend to be in food. Some positive outcomes, apart from the differentiated range, which is the specific objective that we look for in these distinctive exclusive brands, and making Sainsbury's a bit more of a destination for distinctiveness. I think it's incremental sales, obviously. So a lot of the brands that we bring in our portfolio, they address a customer need that wasn't addressed before, and they address it in such a way that is actually very attractive to our customers, which means we attract more customers to come to our shops, or we attract more customers to shop a particular category in a particular range. And that's, of course, a win-win. And in terms of just the collaboration with these startups, the real benefit and kind of positive outcomes are how quickly they can turn around a new idea and how quickly they can react to feedback. So I always think that asking consumers what they want, you'll hear one thing, but once you start putting a product in front of them for it to actually sell, which is what we enable for our brands, you kind of might get a slightly different answer, as in, does it sell or does it not sell, and how much do customers repurchase that particular brand and that particular item. So we share with our brands a lot of that data. And what I've been particularly impressed with is just how quickly they can take it on board and turn it around, and in 3 weeks or 4 weeks time, come back with a slightly tweaked proposition that actually works a lot better.
And that actually, for a CPG that is package, produce and package, is actually a very fast response time.
Yeah, that is an incredibly fast response time.
Very, very efficient. Gil, what is your view on this?
Yeah, I mean, one thing, first of all, I'll build off of Milena, and me and Milena always, I like to say that she and her team are the retail version of what we do. We both even share the same word in our names. We didn't mean that, but we both end up with a future inside. So there's a lot of similarities between our teams. One is from the CPG side and one is from the retail side. Milena said an interesting topic that I actually very much agree with, and on Snack Futures, which was kind of weaved in her topic, which was around, there's a big gap between what consumers say and do. Yeah. And actually, one of the things we do in Snack Futures, which is different than what most CPGs do, or even in kind of, you know, the bigger brands in Mondelez, we do less traditional market research. And actually what we do is we call it IRL, in real life testing. So instead of doing another online test or asking consumers in a focus group, we try to create an MVP, kind of the minimal viable product proposition we have with the brand. And we actually might create even a few, and we'll actually stand in stores or in a farmer market for several days, trying to basically intercept consumers, have them taste it, ask them if they would buy it, actually offer them to buy it, even if it's not shelved in the store yet. At the end, we give it to them for free because we can't actually sell it yet. But actually seeing somebody picking up something that costs $4 and saying, I want 3 of these, even if you can't sell it yet, you know, you're not ready, that's probably the best indicator of a purchase intent and interest, much more than, you know, the more traditional ways. So a big believer of that method the same way. But to the questions on, you know, what we, you know, specifically to your question about a positive outcome, I think, first of all, I think there's, you know, we work with startups, you know, I would say there's actually 2 key reasons. There is a business R&D reason, you know, we want to accelerate to launch something. We want to solve a difficult problem, or we need a technology to help us make it better, cheaper, faster, more sustainable, or tastier, healthier. These are all super important. And that's a big chunk of why we partner with new technologies and partner with startups. But there's actually a second piece that I feel that is sometimes less talked about, which is actually the cultural and the inspirational pieces. You know, when you work in a big company of 80,000 employees, and you know, you have small agile startups with 4 or 5 people that achieve so much. One of the things when we work with startups, there's also a big intangible that we actually want to create a cultural shift in our company, and we actually want to inspire people to think in an agile way, in a fast way, to think in a way that they would have less resources and how they would be more creative, a bit similar to how startups work. And the best way to do that sometimes is actually working with startups. Mm-hmm. And we do see how that impacts positively what we do. And, you know, a great example is one of the brands that we invested on the venture side. It's called Uplift Foods. It's a brand in the US that we've seen a year and a half ago. The founder, we met her, Cara Landa, we met her in, we basically went to FoodX. It's one of the accelerators in food in New York. And she just presented her, she was just starting off the company, very, very early stage in the gut health snacking space. We really liked what she did. And later on, we decided to invest in the company. And when we invested, one of the things, you know, Cara said is, you know, I want to really take the benefit and the technology, the know-how of what my company does, Uplift Foods, into cookies, and create basically cookies that have a gut health component to them and a prebiotic and kind of all these functional benefits. And, you know, by coincidence, you know, we're the biggest cookie company in the world, so we do know a few things about cookies. And, you know, part of being an investor, you want to help to your startups. We said, listen, we have a fantastic R&D team. We have a fantastic scale-up plans, and we'll be happy to work with you together. It's your business, it's your company, you own everything, but that's part of what we want to give as an added value as investors. But in to help you develop, and she did develop. She just launched before COVID started a new line called Gut Happy Cookies. I love the name, and it's a very, very tasty cookies. But going back to my original point, not only we helped her, and that was a very positive outcome, and the product is out there and it's doing well. Actually, the startup helped us so much, and Kara helped us so much because it became so inspiring and motivating to our R&D teams to work together with her, to see how you can go so quickly with a startup, much more bigger than sometimes a bigger company can, from creating something in our kitchens to 5 months later seeing it in stores or selling online. So I would say that's a good example of an outcome that I think was good for the startup and good for us.
You mentioned 2 different KPIs in your test. Milena's mentioned consumption repetition, repurchase. You mentioned initial proactivity to purchase.
Yes. Yes, so that's right. So it depends on the phase. When we are still considering, we're in the development phase and we're debating if we want to launch something, we are looking at really, the purchase intent, actually the fact that somebody is willing to open their wallet and give us money for that. I'm super simplifying it, but that's a key, component for us, a KPI. When we actually launch our brands in Snack Futures, we launch them still in a test mode. We launch them usually for 3 months in several stores in one region, and we call that a transactional learning. In that phase, one of our key metrics and KPIs would be around velocities. And when we say velocities, there are different ways to talk about it. That basically means, how many units you sold per week in that store. And, we would basically put a criteria of what we think should be the velocity based on category norms, what we know from the data of our competitors in that category, from what the retailer tells us. That would be a key component. The second one would be around repeat. We have a big interest to see that actually people bought it once and, how many of them are coming back to buy it again. Mm-hmm. So those would be, and then obviously, the traditional volume, et cetera, but engagement, but those would be 2 key ones that we would be looking at that phase.
Okay. And incidentally, those are exactly the same metrics that we look at, because of course they're important metrics for a retailer as well.
Yeah, that's why I said our teams are similar.
Exactly.
Very good. I want to remind the audience that they can place their questions, and at the end of our Q&A, we will open Q&A round with all the audience. Let's go to the next question. Has working with the startups helped your organization face this crisis period? Gil?
Yeah. So I think first of all, the COVID situation obviously creates a lot of change for everybody, including the food industry, the retail industry, supply chains. I think, there's a few, in the context of startups, I think there's a few things. I think one, we are committed to the startups we work with. For those that we invested in, for those we have already active POCs, I think the first thing we wanted to say is, guys, we're here, we're committed, we're going to pass this together, we're going to continue to help you. And I think that's a super important message that I believe that, and I hope most corporates and venture capitalists and people that work with startups, you are measured how if you're kind of somebody you can rely on in tough times, that's a real test. And, I would like to think that that's how we think, and we've actually interacted even more with the companies and the startups we work with usually just to see how they are and if we can help them. So that's the first piece. But I think from a business perspective, I think, we asked ourselves, what are the things, are there specific challenges that showed up by COVID that actually, we might want to go out to the ecosystem and say, hey, we're looking for help on that. And those were ones that, literally came out of that we believe that actually there might be somebody else outside working on them. So I'll just give a real example. One of the areas, and this is public, so I can talk about it, is, we put out a challenge to several ecosystems about, we're looking to basically antiviral surfaces and antimicrobial surfaces to actually put on some of our e-commerce food packaging. So consumers can actually feel comfortable that then they get a package, it's safe. with everything going on and the concern levels. That's, for example, an example of something that we have live, and we are looking for partners, by the way. If there's anybody on the line that is a good partner, please reach out to me later. We'll be happy to talk with you on that. But that's a specific challenge as an example. But I think in addition to that, and that's a specific one, but then there are broad systematic changes or acceleration of trends that anyway happened that are happening much faster. And those are ones that you say you definitely need to address them, and you need to address them even now faster. So, I'll give it again an example, and everybody's talking about it, the channel digitization and e-commerce. And, obviously e-commerce is getting a big acceleration. And, one of the examples is we have a line of products we launch under Snack Futures, and we launch it in a few brick and mortar stores in the US. And we had a website ready. We were planning to do the e-commerce a bit later. And the moment that COVID hit, we just accelerated the e-commerce. We put it on, we put it live, and it was a very good decision. So these are some steps that move faster. And then there are trends that are just getting boosted, and you can't ignore them. A great example is immunity. Everybody's talking about it. There's a big demand by consumers for immunity boosting ingredients. And of course, we need to see how can we address that, especially when we do more of our well-being brands. Another example, of course, is about food safety, quality, and tracing. And that's one of the examples I gave before in the packaging channel. And then the last one, a lot about actually not only the digitization and kind of e-commerce channels, but actually also how do you digitize, your supply chain and R&D? How do you have much clarity about what's going on? How do you actually use data, big data, AI, modeling and simulation, assuming you can't have people present everywhere? You can do a lot of things by projecting even through R&D versus having people doing experiments. So these are some areas that were important before, but COVID accelerated them. And that made us even more present, looking for the right partners, and a lot of them are in the startup space to help us solve them.
Do you have also a working line with technology startups as well?
Yeah, so sometimes we would have, for sure, first of all, we're a very big company, so I think we'll have, depends on the area. We would have a lot of areas we work with technology, pure technology companies. And, we need to remember, again, at the end of the day, we're a manufacturing company, so we will have industry 4.0 capabilities. We would have cybersecurity partners who we need throughout the gamut. And these would be pure technology players. A lot of them, by the way, sometimes it's players that are focusing on the food industry. Sometimes we meet somebody that is doing something in a different industry. And, we have a great example. A few years ago, we met a startup 2 years ago, actually in Israel, that was doing something unrelated. And we told them, we think you can be really relevant to help us solve a problem around food safety and quality. And they never thought about going to that specific use case. And, we thought that technology can be. So I think a good corporate is also about having clarity about what your challenge is, but actually also having the foresight to sometimes meet a startup and an entrepreneur with a technology that is trying to solve one problem, and he or she are not aware about your problem, and you actually tell them, you can pivot or do another line of business or another solve that is for a different problem that you never thought about. And I think that's part of helping sometimes startups find the biggest burning problems.
Okay, Milena, in your case, has startups provided any acceleration or assistance during the COVID times?
It's really interesting and very unprecedented times. And I think retailers were the first industry to be at the forefront of trying to feed the nations around and keeping our stores open and making sure we have product on shelf. So I think there are several stages of this pandemic. And I have to say, when it first started, I had a lot of question marks about how our portfolio of relatively trade up, relatively premium, innovative products would do at a time when customers are feeling unsettled, unsure of what the future will bring. Loads of people had just been paused from their jobs or even lost their jobs. But what actually turned out to happen is that our portfolio did really well. With, and I guess retailers, I'm sure you're all very well aware, retailers did particularly well during the crisis, being one of the very few places that are still open where people can get their food. But specifically the Future Brands portfolio, I think what was really beneficial and how we as a retailer really benefited from having this portfolio, and I'll talk a little bit about what we did in order to help these brands as well, is it was access to an alternative supply base which actually maybe didn't have supply constraints, because a lot of our supply chains and a lot of our suppliers got very challenged by the crisis, like ourselves as well, having to have fewer employees, not being able to staff a sufficient amount of people on the manufacturing lines, and therefore manufacturing volumes declining because everything had to slow down. So for us, having access to this alternative supply base, and smaller brands, startup brands tend to manufacture in smaller startup suppliers as well, and manufacturers too. So that was good, because we tended to keep the availability of our future brands on shelf when we may have run out of some of the bigger brands. Totally dependent on category, but I think on average, this is what happened. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is, as consumers shopped in grocery stores for almost all of their eating occasions. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know for myself, I got bored very quickly of my standard choices, and very quickly I started exploring what else was around in the supermarket. Mm-hmm. And this is where our portfolio really managed to shine, because this is where startup brands that we have on our shelves offer something that's really different, and they had a little bit more time to communicate with customers as well. And one thing that we managed to do to help is give these brands a bit more visibility. So we're putting our future brands more on what we call secondary space. So the aisles where we normally run promotions, we're putting our brands. We're giving them a lot more presence online and supporting these brands online as well, because that's seen a huge uplift for us too. And we're also using some of our media. So our stores are still frequented by customers. It's much fewer customers because we're trying to manage how many people are in the shop at any one time. But customers are shopping bigger baskets and are spending a little bit more time in the supermarket too, which means they have time to engage with different marketing that is in the shop too. So we've really tried to back our future brands and give them as much visibility and as much cut through with the customers that are coming in our stores. And that's paying off for us. So the portfolio is doing very well. Some winners, some losers. I think some categories are just not doing particularly well, because with all of us at home, any product that is a to-go product by definition isn't doing particularly well, because nobody's on the go anymore. But most of our brands have done well. And we have, I think the other thing that is really important, building off of Gil's point about being a good partner when times are tough. The other thing that we've done is extended preferential payment terms to all of our small suppliers. We know that cash is really tight in this time, and managing working capital is really important. And just being there on the other end of the phone, if a brand has an issue that we may be able to help with, whether that's stock that is coming close to out of date, can we shift that a little bit faster, or extending the preferential payment terms? We've been on the other side of the phone trying to do as much as we can to help our brands. Good.
So we are moving to the final question. We are starting to get some questions for the audience. Feel free to pose your questions in the application. The final question is, what is the most valuable thing you consider food startups can contribute to a corporation, Gil?
Yeah, so, and I think I partially kind of touched on it before, but I think, one, I think, is the more helping solve a problem or a challenge. And I think the interesting thing is that, some of the challenges and things that big corporates, either on the retail side or on the CPG side, need to solve are very big. They can't do them alone. Let's just give the example of sustainability. Yeah. Huge topic, super important topic. It's going to stay. It doesn't matter what people say, COVID or not. Sustainability is a big topic. We all need to address it. One, because it's a big topic that people care about, and it's the right thing to do for everybody. Putting aside business, I think we all want to live in a healthy planet that's going to be there for our kids and our grandkids. Now, to address sustainability in your own company's lens, whatever that means, reduce plastic, making it more recyclable, making your supply chain more efficient, to use less emissions, et cetera, requires actually a lot of collaborations, both with startups, with nonprofits, with other companies, with competitors, etc. So I think and some of the problems, the bigger ones, are actually only become bigger and more important, and companies are becoming more, I think, more responsible in making sure they're addressing that. And I'm talking about, you know, across the spectrum. So I think once startups are having, that's a huge area that they can help companies solve and work with. And I think the second is, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm a big believer in it, and I feel that companies don't, some other companies and, you know, people in general in the industry don't talk enough about, is it's not only a transactional relationship with the startup, come and help me solve a problem, and if you solve, that's great. There is a huge intangible element of a cultural shift, of an inspiration, of making your organization more agile and kind of learning from startups, because we can learn from startups as much as they can learn from us. And I think these are the two big things that I see as an area where startups can help a corporation. I would say that, you know, my big recommendation for startups, and, you know, a lot of them I think are on the line, is, you know, when you work with a corporate, make sure you set up the relationship in a way that you have a high chance of success. You know, make sure you are clear and the corporate is clear on what are the objectives, what are the KPIs, you know, how do we work together? What is the next step? If we meet this, where will we go from here further? And also being super transparent. One of the bigger things I always say, you know, and when I talk in our company and with others is, you know, the biggest gift you can give a startup is when you meet a startup and they pitch you a technology or solution you don't need. If it's not relevant, be honest and tell it to them immediately, because sometimes you just save them so much time. If you tell them, oh, it's interesting, and a startup needs to chase you for a long time until they get that answer, it's so much better to be transparent upfront.
Good advice. Milena, in your case, I will also ask how startups are helping your customers.
Yeah, so I think in addition to what I was mentioning about having really interesting products that our customers love, and we're the one retailer where they can get these interesting products, I would say that's probably the biggest benefit from for our customers. But the benefit, an additional benefit for us, again, going on Gil's point on sustainability, so and working with partners in order to deliver that, we've committed to be net zero by 2040 as a retailer. And there's only so much that we control out of our operations. We control how we run our shops, and that's about it. But when it comes to the types of products that we sell, we rely on our suppliers and on our brands to help us reach those targets. And, you know, with Future in the name of our team, Future Brands, we very much look for startups and brands that have some sort of a sustainability commitment. They don't have to do everything under the sun, you know, try to reduce the carbon footprint and the water use and the plastic use and because you end up with thin air at the end of it, but they're trying to do something better than the alternative. So we're looking for those kind of incremental improvements. In terms of what I think is most valuable in the relationship between a startup and a corporate, I would say challenge, especially for the corporate, challenging and out of the box thinking, and really challenging something. A lot of our entrepreneurs that we work with come from non-food backgrounds, and their naivety is actually really refreshing because they look at things the way you've never looked at them, because, you know, you think about it and it's like, well, this is how things are done, and maybe I'll twist it a little bit. But someone with a completely fresh perspective comes with such great, very creative ideas that that's been one of the most positive things that I think we've learned in working with our brand so far.
Good. So before we move on to the Q&A, I have a final and unexpected question. Is, have you guys been making bread these days?
Yes, and banana bread, because clearly if you're not making banana bread, what are you making?
Agreed.
Good. So thanks a lot. We move on to the Q&A session. We have a number of questions already. So Anchor is asking, what's a better approach, product specific or market specific? To any one of you that want to pick it up.
Can you repeat it again? Sorry.
A better approach, product specific or market specific, my assumption is that it's related to the fit between a startup and a corporation in terms of products.
Market being geography, I'm assuming, or
yeah, geography, yeah.
Right.
But maybe we can. This question is for Ankur. We can ask him to provide more insight, and then we will return to this question. Albert is asking. I need to translate. Sorry. You have spoken about the innovation process with an MVP that is established in the retail point, and that the consumers can decide whether to purchase it or not, independently that you charge for it or not. How do you manage, Gail, the space in a retailer, given that you are not actually selling, and how you manage to obtain data?
That's one of our secret sauce elements, but we collaborate. This is, we won't do this in a large scale. We would probably do this in 2 or 3 stores for a few days, and it would be specific stores that we have a relationship, or we build a relationship. But it doesn't, also an entrepreneur can do it. I mean, if you have a good pitch to them, some stores, the forward-thinking stores that are more independent, usually might have an interest to partner with an entrepreneur early on and give him, a little area, a bit like a sampling table. And then from a data perspective, this would be, there's no data. We actually man the table ourselves. We'll stand there for 3 days and talk to 200 consumers, and we'll keep a little, like the old way, we might keep a little notepad and decide and say, on Sunday I was there and I talked with person number 1. Did he or she show an interest, yes or no? And we gather through that. So it's maybe not a full-blown Nielsen-based study, but if you stand for 3 days and you talk to 200 consumers, trust me, you would know after these 2 days if you have something really compelling or not.
Good. So the next question is coming from Seth. What are the top KPIs in terms of return on snack futures? Does Dirk van der Put look to keep him at the board happy and keep you guys in the job?
I think he's happy, yeah. I hope he's happy. As I mentioned, the KPIs are they're around velocity and repeat, and obviously sales. And the specific numbers would change per category. So meaning, you can have it's all compared to the category you're playing into. So if you would play in salty snacks, you would have much faster velocities than in a premium spread, for example. So I think that it's in the context of your specific category, but those would be the key metrics, and we would adjust a specific number based on the category, the competitive set, the price point and positioning we have. Obviously, if you position yourself as a premium offering in a specific category that is 20% more expensive than others, I'm just giving an example, most likely your velocities would be slower from a unit perspective, but from a dollar perspective, they might be equal or even higher. So bottom line, we'll adjust it per proposition.
We have the big question here. How much money does your company spend in startups per year? If you cannot respond, that's something everybody will understand.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to disclose that number, but I would say, I also don't think it's one number, because I think, for me, it's not only about, how much we invest in venture and how much we do a POC. I would actually, the biggest test for me, if an organization is committed, if you have resources, if you're working on a project with a startup, it's not about giving them a check and paying them. It's actually, are you putting people to work with them? Are you committed? And that is a huge element, working with startups, and Milena would know it, and anybody on the line would know it from a corporate side. If you want to have a successful partnership with a startup, that's a lot of resources from your end. That's people, that's legal, that's procurement, that's consumer insights, and that costs a lot of money.
Yeah, I agree. Innovation is not cheap, but yeah. the return is long term. So these are the two elements that are important. So Kate says hi. I have a brand that either of you might be interested. How should we bring that brand to your attention? So you can
email us.
Email. Kate, if you want to email to us at Eatable, we will put you in contact with Milena and with Gil, both of
Happily.
Michael, this is a question for Milena. What is the most common challenge that new brands experience once they start trading with future brands?
That's a good question, and it tends to be a similar thing, actually. New brands think that getting a listing, a national listing with the retailer, is a huge win and almost the end of the game. And it's a huge win, sure, but it's only the beginning of the game. So especially when you go to grocery retail, you are competing with another 30,000 products on average. So despite the fact that you got a listing, the most common challenge that we see is that brands don't invest enough to get that product off the shelf and into customers' hands. And that investment comes in some sort of marketing, some sort of communication with customers through multiple channels and through multiple ways of communicating with the customers, but to give customers really a reason to pick up that product. And then if the product is good enough, they'll come back and buy it again. But yeah, don't think that getting a listing is it. And that's when you succeed. You really have to work hard afterwards.
Okay. Paul is asking Gil, in your opinion, how is the snacking industry going to look like in 10 years' time, especially regarding cookies?
If I would know that, I would be a rich person. I would love, but no. And now, on a serious note, I think 10 years is a long time from today. But I think there are some underlining trends, and and I think we've seen them in other categories, and in snacking we see them. That I think there's going to be there's going to be a variety of things, and it's, I think, similar to the way it is today. Things would evolve, but you would always have snacks that are have a purpose, and they're serving a need around indulgence, and that's always going to be a key thing that consumers are coming for, especially for confectionery or cookies. But at the same time, you're also going to have ongoing needs around functional benefits, and if today it's immunity, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see other needs becoming even bigger, and helping with people for sleep and ready to eat care, anxiety, and those would be much more functional products that actually help serve a specific benefit. And on top of that, I think, as was mentioned before, I think there's sustainability from a packaging perspective is going to be a key thing, and having the clarity on on the ingredients you use, clean label, and where the ingredients are coming from. So definitely some of the trends we see today, I think they're just gonna, I don't think they're going to go away. I think they're just going to evolve, and a bit like even when you see today on plant-based, a great example, plant-based is very big today, but there's a big belief that we are seeing plant-based 1.0, and probably we're starting to see today that the 2.0, which are plant-based offerings that have significantly less ingredient list than some of the big brands we know out there, because these are significantly maybe less processed and a cleaner label, and even have maybe 5 or 7 ingredients. And I think the same evolution we'll see on some other things.
Good. So this question is from our mutual friend Ivan Farnetti. For a startup considering to launch a new food product in this market situation, when the food service is closed and retail is focused on a strong 16 brands, would you advise to still go ahead, or would you caution to wait? Both of you, Milena and Gil.
So I would actually disagree slightly with the fact that it's retailers or even consumers are just focusing on the big brands. In my experience, that's not true. Our portfolio of exclusive brands over the last 10 weeks has actually done quite well. And we are looking, granted, stores and range reviews and ways to introduce NPD was pretty disrupted over the last 10 weeks. We can't shy away from that, because we were trying to figure out how on earth to keep toilet paper and disinfectant gel stocked on the shelves while not having so many colleagues in the store, etc. But we're looking to launch new products, especially with food service and restaurants being closed, and consumers consuming most of their calories out of grocery stores. We're all looking for innovation. We're all looking for different things. So I would say it's actually not a bad time to launch a good brand. it's a pretty bad time to launch a mediocre brand. I don't think there is space for that anymore.
Good. Yeah.
I think that's I think that last sentence. I mean, I agree with everything. The last sentence is spot on, and I think you know, I think what's interesting is, and I'm a big believer, there's always several things happening in the same time that are maybe different than each other. A bit like the example I gave before, there's going to be always functional snacks and there's going to be indulgent snacks. And I think the same on new products. Yes, you know, companies like ours on Mondelez and, you know, other big established brands have had a fantastic renaissance in a lot of markets, consumers going back to comfort, to the brands they know and love and trust, and that's great. At the same time, you know, I would say for up and coming brands that actually the fact that there's also a lot of channel shift to e-commerce, doesn't matter if it's e-commerce now that is independent or you know, affiliated with one of the retailers or Amazon, etc., actually creates a lot of opportunities for smaller brands, because you know, that's a completely different world. I mean, we're almost competing on a competitive set, and we all need to prove ourselves, and products that work in retail don't necessarily would perform the same in e-commerce if they don't have the expertise in that channel. So I would say that shift actually helps a lot of smaller brands. And I'll say the third thing, which is kind of building off what Milena said, is if you have a good proposition, and I'll put even on top of it, it has benefits or positioning that is actually important today. Again, the example of immunity. That will be very, very relevant today. And you can actually, you know, if you have a strong proposition in that space or other spaces that are going to be important today or in 3 months from today, definitely I would go for that. And the best example is, you know, we in Snack Futures, which we also launched small, new independent brands. We are continuing to launch. So we didn't stop. We're continuing to work on the existing brands we have and new ones. So I think that's a great example. We believe you can still launch in this environment if you have the right proposition.
Okay, we have actually a lot of questions, so I will cherry pick some of them, and the rest we will post them on our website. We will send them to you by email, and we can post them on the website if we don't have time. So interesting question is, what kind of collaboration do you usually reach with a startup once in the real life testing phase is a success? I think this is a good one for both of you.
So I guess the types of the collaboration that we do is the stage one is getting a brand on our shelves and testing that it does work with our consumers. And stage two is probably really backing that brand and taking it national to more distribution. And throughout the stage one and stage two, supporting the brand with appropriate marketing support. So what the Future Brands team brings to the partnership with new exclusive brands is that we put together bespoke marketing activation packages, which are mostly free for the brands that we work with. So the more a brand does well, the more we back it as well, and the more we can open up the types of activations that we can support that brand with.
Gil?
Yeah, and I think for us, you know, again, it depends, you know, as I mentioned before, there are different ways to collaborate with us. So if you're a venture investment, you know, we are shareholders in the company, and, you know, we want to continue to help support that company and help it grow. If it's more of you know, let's say a POC, we're partnering with a startup, maybe with a food tech technology or agri technology, then, you know, a lot of times it would be kind of having the proof of concept, and later on, if things work out, it can lead to a few things. It can lead to a joint development agreement that we're furthering developing and you know, paying for elements of that, or it can lead to a licensing agreement that we license the technology for a fee. Or, you know, it can lead at the end, if this company kind of is established in manufacturing its own product or technology, you know, we can basically become a client. You'll be a supplier, and we'll buy from you. I know, and, you know, you'll be in our procurement system, and you'll get like a payment as if you're a supplier of Mondelez. So I think there are different ways. I would say that, you know, if we take the effort to work with a startup on a real problem, actually the biggest hope of the team that is managing it is to get to the next phase. Because as I said in some of the previous answers, is we would put so much intangible resources on a POC that, you know, we actually do want the startup to succeed, because if they succeed, it means we succeed in solving the problem, and we do want to move with them forward. It doesn't always happen for various reasons, but the hope is always a positive intent.
Okay. There are a few questions about how to contact each of you. I will suggest the audience that want to connect with you to send an email to info@eatableadventures.com, and we will do the connection. A question that I think is relevant for both of you. What are the consumers asking for? More fiber, more plant-based, more local, more transparency in supply chains?
All of the above?
I will reverse it. I will say what is what you are expecting the startups to deliver to you. What are the areas that you think that you will find a benefit with these startups?
So let me start with answering actually what consumers are looking for. I think it's all of the above at a great price, very low price most of the time, and very convenient for them to get their hands on. We're all consumers, we're all a little lazy, and we all want to get a bit of everything for not very much. So it's a tough question to answer, actually, especially if we're talking slightly longer term future. I think for, in terms of the things we're looking for, none of the trends that we were looking for before COVID have changed, I don't think. So sustainability and the guises that manifests itself in grocery products. So through plant-based, through less plastic, through more local sourcing. I think local in particular will probably become even more important given the light that's been shown on global food supply chains that are actually quite fragile. Health continues to be very important for consumers. And again, all the guises that comes under less sugar, less salt, more fiber, more functional ingredients. And convenience, I think, will continue to be important as well. Again, multiple guises that comes under. So I don't think any of those have particularly changed. I think they will continue for the future, and I wish I had a crystal ball just to tell you which ones of those are going to be successful, but we're going to have to work at it and see what consumers actually tell us they want.
Good.
You know, I agree with everything said, so I would rather not repeat the same, but I think spot on in the trends. I would just mention two things I think kind of for highlight, and one is coming out of COVID, it seems like, again, that there's a lot of, going to be even more interest in local, and, you know, locally sourced, locally manufactured, you know, kind of the farmer next door that you just go and that trend existed before, but it might be accelerated from a consumer desire. And the same thing, which I think Milena mentioned, which again, this is now going much higher level from an economy perspective, is in the last few years, we see a lot of snacks, you know, and a lot of products going actually more to the premium space, because a lot of, let's face it, a lot of, you know, and probably a lot of the startups on the line, a lot of the best technology, some of the most exciting brands we know out there that have been disrupting the industry or working with companies like ours or Sainsbury's are actually offering a premium, and they're offering a benefit and a premium, rightfully, by the way, because it costs money to offer an additional benefit or a great ingredient or a technology. You know, assuming again, you know, the economy is in the moment in some kind of a recession. Nobody knows if it's D, V, W, or whatever shape it is going to be. We are, consumers are going to become even more price sensitive. And I think that's something that, you know, everybody would need to address, the same as with startups. And I think finding how you both give the benefits, but actually you have a price point that is still attractive in these times, and a good margin, because you need to make money.
Yeah, there were a few questions about whether consumers will be inclined to pay more for better products, and you respond that the consumers will want better products at a cheaper price, as Milena was mentioning.
Yeah.
Milena, there are a few questions related with the future retail experience. So we asked Gil, how will cookies be in 10 years from now? And we need to ask you, how will be retail 10 years from now?
I can speak about grocery retail, so just let's put it in context. But I'll tell you the few things that we've really seen accelerate over the last 10 weeks. And I think that paints a picture a little bit about what the future of retail might look like. So online and deliveries, 100%. We've, I think, more than doubled our capacity and deliveries online, as have all of our competitors, the whole of the UK market. So there's a little bit of a hurdle with people getting online, you know, setting up your account, making sure the first delivery arrives and you're happy with it. And now that a lot of the population is over that first hurdle, we expect that to stay. The other thing we've seen change a lot is we have an application called Smart Shop, and it's an application that a customer can download on their phone and then scan as they go along in the supermarket, and they've basically paid by the time they finish, so they don't have to queue in line. So those two are just kind of, well, the first one is the online e-commerce, which I think is gonna certainly, well, probably stay at a higher level than it was before. We don't know what that level is going to be exactly. And then the second is using technologies around the store. So from a retail experience perspective, I would say that's those two are definitely going to stay. And then the other one is, this has been a trend for a while as well, is in the UK in particular, supermarkets are quite big, and they tend to, some of them tend to be a little bit out of store. And over the last almost 10 years, with a change in shopping habits, we've realized that we have too much space in our shops. So we're starting to use our shops not just to display products, but to be a little bit more exciting and actually have some sort of a different experience. We call it moment of wow, that actually impresses customers and stops their journey, disrupts their journey a little bit in order to give them something different, present a slightly different product. So I think that trend of slightly more experiential shopping when you're even in a grocery store, that's also going to continue, and linked with the two previous. So if customers are getting around the shop faster because they're doing their own paying as they go along, or if they're buying some of the things online, when they come to a store, they would expect it to be a more exciting experience.
Okay, interesting. Gil, there are a few questions about how you do your tests. You have a specific market where you do all these MVPs. What is the way you optimize the tests for new products that solve different problems? How do you fine tune the product to the actual consumers?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a few things. I think one, for the first question is, yes, when we do the transactional learning test, that, you know, the 3 months I talked about, or 4 months that we test in a few stores, we would do it in one geographic location. We usually do it in a major city. Most of the propositions we do, as I mentioned, are more on the well-being premium snack space. So a lot of it will be maybe New York, maybe LA. We've done in Paris. So, you know, some of the major metropolitans that a lot of you guys would be familiar with. On the test, you know, we use a lot of methodologies. So, you know, you know, first of all, we also love the existing methodologies that everybody uses, but, you know, we like to move fast, and we like to test hypotheses very quickly and to see how they're going, and pivot and change and optimize. And, you know, the beauty of that, and I think everybody knows that on the line, that, you know, the digital world enables you to do things very quickly. I mean, you can use you know, Facebook ads, Instagram ads. I mean, you can put different propositions online and see how they're doing and which ones are getting more engagement and click-through rate, even before you develop a bundle, just because if you're thinking about different benefit spaces or different consumer targets. And the beauty is online, you can actually decide who sees your ads and who clicks on them. So I think that, you know, the way we like to do it is, you know, we like to have a clear space that we're going from a consumer, a good clarity on who is our design consumer target, what are the problems we're trying to solve, and then we'll have different propositions or benefits that we would test very quickly. We'll optimize them, and only when we start having clarity on that, we would actually start developing the bundle. And as I said, then we would have a proposition, we'll have a brand, and we would sometimes we'll have different products, sometimes we'll have different brands even, and we'll take those and sometimes we show them to what we call family and friends that meet the target. And again, we do this very quickly online or in person. But then our goal is to move to what we call an in real life testing, which, by the way, you know, could be in a retail environment. We actually recently had another project. I can't disclose the target, but it's a target that, you know, actually we tested them in a specific area where they actually, you know, do their activity, I would say, and you know, and that's where we did, and we saw their interest level in that specific space where they hang out most of the time, and actually when they make decisions to buy things. So that's part of what we do, and I think that one of the biggest kind of guiding principles is to have a hypothesis, to validate them for good or bad, to be quick, and to constantly optimize and change until you get to the right proposition.
Good. So we don't have more time. There are still a few questions, so we will collate them in a easier way to respond, and then we will provide you to respond by email with no rush. Before we all leave, I'd like to announce the upcoming seminar that, Gil, you will be amazed to know is about the Israeli startups ecosystem. So this coming Tuesday, we are hosting an event with 4 Israeli startups. This is a seminar we are making in collaboration with the Israeli Sport Authority and the Ministry of Foreign Trade in Israel. And we will have 4 exciting startups that are producing solutions like the ones you mentioned before, but to do biocoating for health and safety and robotics and etc. That will definitively prove very useful in this situation we are living up right now. Wanted to thank you, both of you, Milena, Gil. Thanks a lot for making the time to be with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
And hope to meet you soon.
Thank you. And thank you for everybody for joining. We're looking forward to getting your questions and connecting with those that want to connect.
Thanks, everybody. Next event is going to be next Tuesday, 26th at the same time here on the same channel. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, José. Thank you, Milena. Bye-bye.
Bye.